Welcome back to this class. Let's see the difference between CO and CO2 in chemistry. Yes, follow me. CO and CO2. CO simply means carbon 2 oxide, or we call it carbon monoxide. This is the olden days name. Now, this one is called carbon 4 oxide. Carbon 4 oxide. And or we can call it carbon dioxide. Now, why do we call them this name? Why do we call them this name? Carbon 2 oxide. Let me first explain the reason why we call it carbon 2 oxide before explaining the reason why we call it carbon monoxide. First, the element called carbon belongs to group 4 in the periodic table. Now, under those elements in group 4, they display variable oxidation number. They display variable valency, especially carbon. Carbon can have the valency of 2, it can have the valency of 4 sometimes, and then valency of 6 sometimes. Now, if carbon wants to form oxide, that is, if you want to form bond with oxygen, it forms the bond covalently. So it can make use of either 2 or 4 to form the bond. Now, whenever carbon forms a bond with valency of 2, let's say carbon 2 and oxygen, the valency of oxygen does not change. Most of the time, valency of oxygen is 2, especially if we are forming oxide of metals and non-metals, except in peroxide. So let's cross multiply. This will give us C2O2. Now, since we have common 2, we can just divide both by 2. So we have CO. Now, for the fact that we have used valency of 2 for carbon, we have to pronounce the name of this by a UPAC rule by saying carbon 2 oxide. Thank you. Now, why do we call the same compound? Why do we call it carbon monoxide? If we check the atoms of carbon that we have here, we can see that it's 1. What about the atom of oxygen? We have 1. So in the olden days, they use the atoms to form their name. So because we have 1 oxygen, so that's why we call it monoxide. Anytime we have 1 oxygen, it's mono-oxygen, monoxide. So putting carbon with it, you have carbon monoxide. Now, you can see, I'm sure that you already know the reason why we call this carbon 4 oxide and carbon dioxide. But let me explain. Let's go. Now, carbon, whenever carbon makes use of the valency 4, and then oxygen valency 2. So when we cross multiply, we have C2O4. We can reduce this to the lowest term to give us CO, 2 here, 2 here, CO2. That's why we have carbon 4 oxide, because we have made use of the valency 4 for carbon. And then why do we call it carbon dioxide? Carbon dioxide. If we check the atoms of oxygen here, we have 2 atoms of oxygen and 1 atom of carbon. So because we have 2 atoms, 2 stands for di, 3 stands for tri, 4 stands for tetra. So that is why this is called carbon dioxide. Now, apart from the names, we also have some other difference. This one is an acidic oxide. An acidic oxide, because if we check the pH of this, it will be less than 2. So it will be less than 7. Sorry. So because all acid, their pH is always less than 7. But for base, all their pH is greater than 7. Now, this carbon monoxide is a neutral oxide. Neutral oxide. So it doesn't behave like an acid and doesn't behave like a base. And this carbon monoxide since it is neutral, that means its pH is exactly 7. So both carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide, they are very, very dangerous when they are too much. Even though this is the one that we breathe out from our body, and plants actually need them for photosynthesis. So too much of them is dangerous. Thank God for plants that help us to trap, that help us to take away some of the carbon 4 oxide in the atmosphere, causing purification of the atmosphere. Kábíyèsí Ọlọ́run. Glory be to God. Thank you for viewing this. God bless you.